All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our first Tuesday discussion presented by the Heart Hub. And so this is the first one of these that we've really done with this particular branding angle. So this will be a fun little experiment. So tonight we're joined by Tarzi McLean, who is a fixture in the psychedelic and mental health community in Calgary. And she's going to be talking about coping mechanisms and regulation. And no wonder we feel like crap. There's a lot going on right now. So a little bit of an agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about what the Heart Hub is. There's some people coming in who may not be familiar with what the Heart Hub community is since it changed a few months ago. We'll get into Tarzi's presentation, and then as time permits, up to about 8:30 Mountain tonight, we'll do a Q&A. May turn into a bit of a sharing circle. Will be a bit of an experiment. We'll see how it goes, but the time is ours till about 8:30. And so the Heart Hub is located at thehearthub.ca. And so what our purpose is all about is really to bring together people in community that's primarily not on Facebook, but to be in a space for people who are really interested in diving into quote unquote doing the work. People who are interested in finding out more about themselves, finding out what's underneath the surface of maybe some of the things that they've experienced through expanded states of consciousness, typically with psychedelics, but not always, and who are looking to really say, well, what's next for me after having these experiences? Who am I underneath the fun and amazing experiences that one can have in those few hours? And as you process those, doing so in community can be really, really powerful. And so when people join the Heart Hub, what we've sort of committed to each other and committed to is that over, say, a 1-year period being in this community, we hope that people are fundamentally changed coming out of it, that we are able to process things together that may be trauma related, where we're doing it differently than we might in therapy. We're processing with each other in a community and in a peer-based focus, challenging each other to try different things, to experiment with ways to navigate the realities of our day-to-day life that are a little bit maybe different and something that we may not have tried before. And so discovering our intuition, finding our purpose, doing things that are not necessarily things that we would run into in a meaningful way in our day-to-day life. And so Tarzi coming in and presenting really dovetails on that. So there's a lot going on in the world. What is it that we can do differently in community with some of the tools and techniques that she's going to be talking about tonight, as well as individually, and how are they different? How do they work together? And so Tarzi has a master's degree in counseling psychology, and she's, as I said, been a fixture in the psychedelic space in the mental health community in the Calgary, Alberta area for a lot of years. And she's become a good friend of mine and a teacher and a mentor for almost 5 years now. And so having her here to present on this is a real joy. And you can find out more about her at her website, soulcompass.info, and we'll put that link in the chat as well. We'd encourage you, as the presentation goes on, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. We'll be doing a Q&A after, but if you have ideas or thoughts, throw them in the chat. We'll make sure that we can go through them afterwards. I always forget to ask questions that I have during a presentation. And so with that, I will turn it over to Tarzi.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, can you guys see that? I hope. Okay. So some of you guys I know, so that's good. That makes me always feel like a little bit more comfortable type of thing, but some of you I don't really know. So just kind of checking through the audience kind of thing here. Yeah, navigating nervous system surges and existential angst in times of trouble. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? But really, these guys asked me to speak, and yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about, kind of the context for this in a minute. And some of you guys might have heard some of the content about this. Like, I've done this presentation various different times for different groups, and I always tweak it every time. So there might be some things that are a review for maybe a couple of you. So but before I get into kind of some of the details of where this came from, I just want to say a little bit more about me for those that don't know me. Oh, hang on a sec here. How come I can't scroll down? Here we go. This is a picture of me. I'm a parent, I'm a partner, my 2 kids and me. This was last summer, going whale watching on Vancouver Island. And that was definitely a highlight of last summer. So I've been working in mental health and counseling and therapy, as Peter said, for a long time. And but I've also been involved in the psychedelic community for a long time. And I guess if I was to sort of talk about, what this is, I'm just always really curious about the things that, change and affect people. And during the last couple of years, with COVID, with the state of the world, everything like that, there's just a few key things that I've put together to try to even like help myself make sense of like what's going on. And some of it is a little bit kind of geeky stuff that I've put in. I'll share with you guys things that I found really interesting. And then some of this stuff is, things that you're maybe going to be familiar with, things you already know, but sometimes it's just good to be reminded and kind of, have reinforcement of what we're already doing to help keep us in the right direction. Some things I definitely, are my personal opinions. Some of the comments that I make, for those that know me, know that I can be have my own opinions and kind of be direct sometimes. So you don't have to agree with everything. And we'll definitely have some time to have some questions and discussion afterwards too. So this is me kind of dumping out a bunch of stuff at you, and also want to hear back kind of what you think of it all as well. So before I talk anymore, I'm just going to show the next slide here. And this was also another experience for me last summer, but when you look at that picture, it's pretty relaxing. It's pretty nice. It's again, Vancouver Island. And I just want to invite you to just pause for a sec and pay attention to what's happening in your body. And you can either look at the picture on the screen, or you can close your eyes and just see what it's like to tune in just for a moment. Sometimes this is really easy. Sometimes it's more difficult. And just kind of track and just notice even just your system right now. Might be buzzing from what's been going on in the day. Or you could be tired, or you could just be curious. And just take notice of what your body's telling you right now. And as always, coming back to the breath, just noticing your breathing. Just not trying to make it any different, just where it's at right now. And just invite you to come back, however you want to come back into our session here. And just being really aware of where our bodies are, where our systems are. Just take in what you can, because I know everybody's come from different places and different stages and what's happened for you today or this week or whatever. So just be as present as allows, I guess. So, all right. So we're going to move away from the island, and we're going to move on to something else. So this slide I saw last week, and I was like, Chris Farley has to come to the presentation. And part of the rationale of this tonight is these guys actually asked me to speak originally about death and dying and death literacy. And I was like, it's too much right now. I think we just need a session on like how we're all doing and coping and that type of thing. So yeah, historical events, isn't that kind of interesting? Like, just who would have thought that we got to be born in this really interesting time? So when COVID started a while ago, one of the things that really interested me was just looking at all the differences that were happening, all the dualities that we were trying to hold and that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of discrepancies around what sort of has been happening for us in the world. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about stuff in the Ukraine and just like health things and life things and everything like that. So a lot of us want to be really informed. We want to pay attention. We don't want to just stick our heads in the sand, but we know sometimes that there's a cost in terms of, what happens with our bodies, what happens with our coping, our emotions, all that kind of thing. And that we have, kind of our individual side of things, but what we do or choose as individuals has this ripple effect out. And that we have to kind of like just hold fast and kind of get through things. But also we know when we just kind of, have to just kind of keep it together, that there's a lot of like having to endure and like a kind of a, almost like a repression or a depression that can happen when we have to kind of keep things in. There's a lot of pressure to do the right thing or to be a good person or to pay attention or to follow the rules. But that's very subjective and everybody has different opinions about that. And one of the things that we know too about, just communicating and expressing and all that type of thing is that we want to do so when there is safety around doing that. And one of the things that I've really noticed, and I'm sure all of you, same opinion too, is that in our collective and our society, whether it's online, conversations with family, people you meet on the street, whatever, it has not really been safe to have different opinions. And that honesty has kind of been something that's been kind of tricky because a lot of people are afraid to reach out. They're afraid to have opinions, and also be just afraid to do the wrong thing or to say the wrong thing. And isn't that, really quite interesting? I think just how everything has spun us over the last little while. And it's going to be interesting to see how we move through that into the spring. So I want to talk a little bit about shock and stress responses, because we've all had that for sure, I'm sure in various different ways. And some of you might be quite familiar with those. Some of this is based in what happens in terms of kind of traumatic events or just ongoing prolonged exposure to difficult kinds of things. So if you can think of, I'm sure, maybe it's even happened to you recently, times where you have had a shock or a stress response. We can feel it in our body, and we feel things in different ways depending on kind of how aware we are and how connected we are to kind of what's happening physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, that type of thing. It can be things like a body surge or like a mental fog, feeling numb, feeling buzzy, anxiety, heightened emotions, kind of feeling disconnected, not real. Some people even feel nausea. And there can be, the inability to take in information. I know for me too, there's sometimes where I feel like I don't have all my cognitive faculties about me because there's just a lot, kind of coming in or going on. And we know too that with the more that this happened kind of as a prolonged state, if it keeps going and that kind of stress and toxicity builds up, it really affects all of our levels in our body, and it can even affect things like our autoimmunity for, kind of looking at a longer period of time. And there are some biological sort of pieces to this around just kind of, being a human, being wired for different information that comes in. So I'm sure most people are familiar with, the flight, fight, freeze effects that happens. This is built into our survival. Way back when, or in, kind of more primitive situations, or even now, if something kind of jumps out at us and we need to be able to respond, our body gets flooded with a whole bunch of, cortisol and adrenaline, and it's like, we got to run and get out of the way. And so some of the surges and some of the responses that we're feeling, it's very, very much, it's kind of an old sort of thing for us in terms of being able to just survive and get out of the way in some kind of way, shape, or form. And there's kind of a collective context to this too, because humans as mammals, we also look to our other kinds, our kind of tribe or our, village or whatever it is. And we look at what's going on around safety as to what other people are doing. So when we can sort of notice what's going on from what other people are doing. And that's definitely affected us, I think, in the last little while too, because everybody's kind of been jacked up, way more hypervigilant about things, just kind of in our society overall. And then I wanted to talk about, this is kind of where it's like kind of getting into the kind of geeky sort of stuff, just a few terms that I found really, really interesting. And maybe some of you are familiar with these too, but I think they're really applicable to what's happened in our world in the last couple of years. One is anomie, and which is a sort of a sociology term, and it means normlessness. And anomie happens during times of rapid social change, economic change. Norms can flex, like what's sort of normal and predictable. And this can lead to a lot of feelings of, feeling purposeless and kind of hopeless, depressed, anxious. Sometimes it's also exciting because it's like, oh, something's new is happening. We don't really know what's going on. Another concept that really helped me is called allostatic load. And this is kind of a biology term, and it's relating to the balance in the body. And I'm just going to read the description I have, and it's a little bit technical, but part of efficient regulation is the reduction of uncertainty. Humans naturally do not like feeling as if surprise is inevitable. Because of this, we constantly strive to reduce the uncertainty of future outcomes, and allostasis helps us to do this by anticipating needs and planning how to satisfy them ahead of time. It takes a lot of energy to do that, and if it doesn't sort of resolve the uncertainty, the situation can become chronic, and then this allostatic load happens because it's kind of constantly generating all of the time. And this when you get sort of a giant allostatic load around stress responses, it can also change things like our brain architecture and how our system works, kind of pathophysiology, that type of thing, which is kind of understandable in terms of even just COVID over the last little while, kind of this prolonged state. And then surge capacity. It's interesting, we use surge capacity as a definition of even in the healthcare system and that kind of thing. But surge capacity is a collection of adaptive systems, physical and mental, that humans draw on for short-term survival in acutely stressful situations, such as natural disasters, wars, that kind of thing. The issue is that with surge capacity, it only allows us to adapt to major disasters if they're temporary. But when things kind of are prolonged, like the pandemic's been, this emergency phase now becomes chronic. And so surge capacity gets depleted and it needs to be renewed. And I think that's kind of what people are all kind of looking for right now is we need something else, because it's like we have very little to kind of generate from right now. The other thing too that I think people have been feeling a lot of, pandemic, life, wars, changes, everything. And again, really, we're very privileged in our part of the world, but I think we're also in our kind of global village. We're way more affected by what's going on all around the world than we ever have before, is also the concept of grief. And for sure, I'm sure we've all felt various, ways, shapes, forms with grief. And we know that grief is a process, not an event. I feel like even for myself personally, I've had various processes of grief over the last little while, and it's absolutely like the image on the right. It's a mess. You're good one day and then you're not the other. There's all kinds of emotions that come around it. It's kind of like this, not really wanting to see what's going on and then kind of moving back and then trying to understand it. And that's very much the process of grief, is kind of this back and forth all over the place, almost like coming in bursts in terms of our capacity to get our head around something. So some of the things that you might be feeling, and I just kind of put this list together, and I'm sure people could come up with all kinds of other ones. And this is for, when I use the title of no wonder you feel like crap, that could be about all kinds of things, right? But people have probably felt, and we can talk about this at the end too, sometimes people kind of regress, like go back to prior ways of operating, because sometimes it's actually easier on the system to go back to an old pattern. We talked about having, mental fog, not being able to kind of just like adult in the same way. People's past triggers and traumas can definitely get amplified. All kinds of different feelings, intrusive thoughts, sometimes feeling like we totally want to withdraw and go hide under a rock and like, fuck it sort of feeling. And then other times like getting a lot of energy and being productive and wanting to kind of take things on. Having different relationships with like gratitude and, kind of what we do get to have in life, and definitely bigger questions about kind of what is this all for and who am I and what am I doing? Kind of those big existential kind of meaning making questions can definitely come up as well. So there can be a lot of things going on. There can be all kinds of responses, and understandably so, because if somebody told us a few years ago, this is going to be the context that you're going to be living through, we'd be like, what the heck is going on? So really, maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe some of these responses are quite normal. And I'm sure everybody's had a whole bunch of different kinds of, thoughts, feelings, reactions, responses. And a lot of times I think what happens for us is we say, oh, that's bad, or that's wrong, or I shouldn't be feeling this, or, even kind of like psychedelic work, we think that something's bad, that, it's difficult, it's bad, right? So what if it's not? What if we just have to kind of make space for this and just kind of allow things to happen as they need to? And so one of the questions I have too, just around kind of coping and managing through things is, especially when it comes down to like other people's opinions, and maybe you've been in a situation where somebody doesn't agree with your particular stance and you're trying to figure that out and work on it, or people are pissing you off or something like that, right? Because I think a lot of us have had all kinds of different reactions around friends, family, community, that kind of thing. How do we keep ourselves regulated? How do we keep taking care of ourselves? How do we preserve ourselves? And how do we be compassionate and kind of bump up our capacity and not just kind of spiral down into chaos, crisis, and cynicism? That is a hard one. And not that it's like either or, because sometimes we do kind of lean to various different sides around how we can proceed with things. So the next few slides, I'm just going to talk about my bias is always about, we can't change what everybody else is doing, but we can concentrate on just being able to manage ourselves and take care of our bodies, and be able to be really aware and in tune with what's going on. That's always kind of within our ability, right? Because sometimes even when there's a lot of chaos, or we're really swayed by news of the world, how do we come back to right here? So basically, and some of you guys aren't going to be surprised about this, is how do we really take care of our nervous systems? And that could be, just our physical body, our whole system overall. We know that self-regulation, so the ability to, when information's coming in, we can use our bodies, use our breath, use our self-awareness, use our ability to kind of like manage emotions and be effective in the moment. That's the idea of regulation. And we know that regulation isn't just, we can do it individually, but because we're so wired for connection, our regulation is also really geared towards how we co-regulate with other people. So understandably so, when everybody's been really, kind of agitated and activated over the last little while, we also get, like, all of us individually, we get more activated and agitated from kind of the collective, right? So one of the ways of being able to practice, how do we slow down? How do we tune in? How do we pay attention, is also about how we do that with other people. And I just have a picture there. I think definitely, using things like nature and imagery is really big on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about listening to the body. And again, some of these are really basic, but I think, it's always good to do a little bit of an inventory of like, hey, how are we doing with that? Like, even for me, sometimes I always have a bit of a, is there anything I could be doing more, and not like, oh, I have to be the best person I can be during the pandemic type of thing, but, how am I in relationship to all these pieces around how I'm taking care of myself? And of course, encouraging people to look at that lens as well. So obviously what we put in our body, eating habits, substance use, all that kind of thing, how we sleep, how we operate with devices, things like that. Are we getting up and moving around? Are we getting touch, which has been like a really big one, obviously, with, when we were more separated from people during the pandemic, that type of thing. Breathing, kind of like the breathing exercise we did kind of at the beginning there. And my bias is super huge on getting out into nature, sometimes getting away from cities, just even finding, a park where there's trees. If you are in the city, just connecting with something that reminds you that there's more going on than, maybe the virtual world or problems in the world and that kind of thing. The other thing that I wanted to tell you guys about too, I just put this image in here. In a lot of sort of somatic or body-centered work, there's this concept of the window of tolerance, which is a way of explaining kind of our optimal sort of states. And this is actually an alternative to that, which I really, really liked. I really like the word capacity. I think that's just like such a great word because it comes down to like, what abilities, what sort of bandwidth do I have to be able to kind of just move through my life? And so this is an image of something called the circle of capacity. Kathy Malchiotti is from the States and she's a trauma therapist. And so what this represents, I'm just going to read out what the description is, represents our baseline experience, an area that shrinks and expands in response to a variety of impacts, including traumatic stress. The outer circle includes two general areas of body-mind capacity. One is the capacity for self-regulation, co-regulation, and resilience that modulate hyperarousal, so being really up, and overactivation. The second is the capacity to inhibit body and mind through resourcing enlivenment, empowerment, self-compassion, joy, playfulness, and curiosity. These two areas are presented within a circle rather than a hierarchy because these experiences are not separate, but often overlap. And both are essential in reducing the impact of traumatic stress and supporting the restoration of the self as healthy and whole. So I really like that. I just think that, it's kind of a neat model to think about around how we kind of dance around just taking care of ourselves here. So I'm going to also talk about just some other coping tips and tools. And in a little while, we'll talk about some of the ones that are working for you guys individually or personally. So one of the big ones I think and it'd be interesting to see how people have used these over the last little while is adjust your scope. And so like one of the things even that happened for me was that it was like, even a few years ago, I just want to, do as much as I can and deliver as much as I can and like go, go, go. And I think a lot of people have had to kind of pull back around, actually doing less because they're just taxed and they don't have the ability to generate as much as they could before. I think in some ways, maybe that's not a bad thing for our society. It's okay to slow down. Scheduling less, doing one thing in the moment, just doing one thing at a time, bringing in more mindfulness, bringing in less judgment about how things are going, being able to see things in different lights, reframing, sometimes distracting. Sometimes we do need to just kind of tune out and watch Netflix and just kind of like take care of ourselves in that way. Anything that shifts kind of the energy in your body, always paying attention to kind of like a body scan, like what's happening for me right now. I do that even when I'm like in the car or standing in line at the grocery store. I kind of go like, oh, what are my guts telling me right now? Or like, are things racing or what's happening with my breath? SIFT is an exercise that's like being able to go through sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. So again, just a little bit of a structure of just kind of tracking through the body. Self-soothing, I think that one's a really, really huge one, is being extra, I don't want to say selfish, but just like caring around like, wearing comfortable clothes or like having a comfortable chair or making sure that there's things around you in your environment that feel good and not being apologetic about that. Just, being like, these are the things I need. So that's what's coming into the picture. And then I think for another one too, I hear from a lot of clients that, and even just people in general too, that, there's kind of like the need to kind of be informed and pay attention and like, know what's going on. And, in terms of all the things in the world and health updates and things like that. But also we need to know when to just be like, whoa, I'm out, it's too much, because when we get completely overwhelmed by some of the information, and if we continue to bombard ourselves with things, with information overload, then, it can impact even our own health and wellness for sure. Now I'm going to go to the question of psychedelics, and I just stuck this one in because this is a group that speaks about you know, kind of psychedelic awareness and information, that kind of thing. And I've definitely had a lot of people that, you know, it's like, what happens when you take psychedelics, you know, during a pandemic or during times of really big social change and flux, or even like your own personal transitional change. And I think that's a really personal question, right? Some people say, oh, well, you know, you should wait and have the perfect optimal time and make sure that everything's going great in your life and make sure that, you know, you have the best set and setting and all that kind of thing. Well, if we wait for that perfect time to happen, then sometimes it never happens, right? And definitely people have been taking psychedelics during the last couple of years. And I think we know that for sure, you know, the outside environment is what's going on with the world affects people's journeys, affects people's spiritual experience, affects people's, you know, just psychedelic information that comes in sometimes. And so just knowing, just appreciating that, you know, we're all kind of person and environment. Of course, the environment is going to affect how we do. And I'm also a proponent of, you know, sometimes when things are really rough, sometimes when our stuff is rough, or we need kind of a reset, or we need sort of an interruption of how we feel or our relationship to things, having a non-ordinary state or an altered state experience may disrupt that. So it's just sort of a bit of a question. And the other thing I added in here too was some principles of psychedelic harm reduction that are very much in line with the things of the world in the last while. So these are just, you know, psychedelic kind of crisis support tenets and you know, things even around you know, having sort of, you know, setting up your experience as good as possible. But I think it's so applicable to the world right now too. So we talked about before about just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's all bad. I can think about even my own perspective of the last little while, like sometimes where it's like, wow, this kind of isn't the best time, but there's lots of learning that's, you know, come out of it and whatnot too. The harder you hold on to something and the more you fight against something, you're going to get more of a struggle. And isn't that totally true with, you know, just even things with the pandemic, with, you know, world events in the last little while? How do we surrender? How do we let go to things and kind of just like welcome it, even though we don't really want to maybe, you know, see something or understand something or have to go through something. Connecting to the body, of course, is a really huge resource, and being able to, you know, activate things, being able to, you know, have that catharsis, get things out, express is such a huge resource for our own wellness. Being able to pay attention to yourself and others is critical, absolutely. If we kind of lose that, I think that, you know, we lose a lot of our humanity and our just ability to connect with ourselves. The only way out is through, right? Like that, we say that about psychedelic experience, you know, you can't make it go faster or slower or anything like that. You just got to kind of work it out. And I think the same thing of even just all the things that have happened with the pandemic. I mean, I personally feel like we're kind of getting through, whether it's the spring or, you know, various restrictions lessening. I kind of feel like I can walk outside and be like, oh, okay, maybe the trip is, you know, maybe it's shifting a little bit, right? And the other thing we know that's so important is that being able to interface with other humans, whether it's in a difficult psychedelic experience or just in your life, period, right now. It's so important to have people that you can talk to, that you can understand, they know that, you know, they can understand, and just having people around you as opposed to trying to navigate through something alone. It's just so important. And the other thing I wanted to say here was, I think a lot of the feeling that a lot of us get, you know, I feel like I'm, you know, kind of tapped into what's sort of going on a societal or a community level, or maybe even a global level. And I think a lot of people have that feeling where we know that there is this collective consciousness, you know, this huge side of being human like that. And the things that we understand about even just COVID, but, you know, everything else that's going on too, is that it is a collective trauma. Absolutely. Like I think when people study our demographic in another little while, like we're going to be sort of a subsection of, you know, a cross section of study in a while to see like how this has impacted our overall, you know, qualities of life and that kind of thing. And I think the other thing that we've noticed is that it's this collective trauma, but there's more feelings of sort of helplessness, sometimes paralysis, sometimes also just like kind of feeling like just kind of a stuck feeling, stuck energy. And so like this isn't one person's issue. You know, sometimes when I talk to people and they feel like, you know, a lot of helplessness or just kind of powerlessness, we talk about it's not just them, it's this bigger kind of collective thing that's happening. But one of the things that we know about trauma in any way, shape, or form is that there is also something that is called post-traumatic growth. And so I'll talk about what that is. Post-traumatic growth is something that is defined as the positive sort of changes that can happen because of some kind of experience of struggle with some kind of challenging circumstances. And there's different areas of growth that can come from adversity. So greater appreciation of life, more appreciation and strengthening of close relationships, increased compassion and altruism, identification of new possibilities or purpose in life, greater awareness and utilization of personal strengths, enhanced spiritual development, and creative growth. So I just think even if we've had like, and we're still kind of in, maybe it's shifting, I don't really know, kind of this collective difficulty, can we look then to these opportunities for, you know, kind of enhancement that come from the post-traumatic growth sort of part? I hope so. I hope so. So the other thing too that we know is really, really important, and that's also why this group exists. That's why there's so much impetus to, you know, be able to talk and come together and figure things out together collectively. I always, you know, say this, the community is the medicine. You know, everybody can have their own individual, whether it's, you know, experiences or psychedelic work or whatever, is that it's so important to be able to come together and share in community and be like, oh, I'm not the only one that's had this, or, oh, somebody else is, you know, can relate to me or something like that. I really think that the community has this insulating effect from our, you know, feeling like crap, right? You know, when we get together and talk with other people and just feel like there's something kind of bigger going on that completely helps, doesn't take our pain away, doesn't take our suffering away and just kind of wipe it all out, magic wand type of thing, but just being with other people and sharing and being like, oh, okay, yay, other humans. It's just so much of a resource. Okay, so the next part is a chance to talk a little bit about just kind of what you guys think of this and kind of like what's been going on for you. So I think we've got about 18 people in the group here. Peter, what's your sense? Do you think we should break out into smaller groups, or everybody just kind of stay together, or what do you think?
Let's try and keep it together for a bit. We'll see how it goes. We can always do a breakout in a bit if it's a little unruly, but I like an unruly group.
Yeah, and then maybe I'll stop sharing for this part too, and then there's like just a few slides that I have kind of at the very end too. So yeah. So yeah, just wondering like if people maybe you can come off. So I'm going to try to view so I can see everybody here. There we go. That works. Yeah, feel free to come off mute if you want, or just kind of talking about like if there was particular things in that I went through that were kind of interesting, or just like kind of how you feel you've been doing lately with like and various shifts from, you know, a couple of years ago to kind of where you are now. It'd be just really interesting to hear how people have managed.
I've found that the beginning of the pandemic, life didn't change all that much. I was already working from home. I was already working remotely. I'm in a very privileged position on the surface. It didn't look like things changed that much, but everything you described is something that I've experienced. And so the sort of existential dread and existential pressure of that, plus all the things, have definitely caused cracks. They have pushed and amplified and accelerated unprocessed trauma or things that I'm seeing my therapist about. They really, really got amplified in a way that became disruptive over time, not as much as I'm sure some people experience, but in their own way, very disruptive to my life. And finding all the resources and trying all the things, therapy and acupuncture and massage and being in community and medicine work, they all have different aspects of helping with this, but it all ultimately became coping until really getting underneath all the things that I was coping for until the root stuff got access. So I'm curious how much of the stuff that we're coping with is really masking symptoms as opposed to dealing with root issues.
And how would you know? Too, right? Yeah. And sometimes it's like the question of like, because I think a lot of us really, kind of orient to like, kind of get at the root and kind of address it. And sometimes we just can't too, right? Sometimes it's like, no, I'm only going to stay up here because that's all I can do today. I'm just gonna kind of keep treading water, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Peter.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, further to Peter's point, like some people are doing this maintenance, and I find it interesting to see the number of people that I interact with that have gone off the deep end, right? Like, and it may not be 100% of the time, right? But they're just so on edge. There's that one day where they're just off the edge, right? And they react completely disproportionately to something that's coming around, right? And then, there's the radicalization that's gone on, over this whole time period, right? Where people that seemed completely normal 2 years ago, they, 180 degrees, they are a different person right now, right? And just trying to be, accepting and supportive of these people, right? That are in your life. And I do sales, right? So, some of these are my customers, some of these are vendors or people I need to interact with. And, it's difficult because you never know what somebody else is going through. And that's never really hit home for me before kind of this pandemic, and just seeing how people change so radically in such a short period of time, right? And making sure I'm not one of those guys too, right? So kind of trying to do the work and trying to, because I found, my arousal through this whole thing was interesting to see, because I was getting angry at people and, upset with the situation and everything. And then, I kind of came down the other end of just, trying to accept different people for the, the opinions they have, and they're trying to deal with it the best they can, and trying to find that really kind of helped me maintain a little bit more balance for myself, right? But it's all about that sympathetic arousal, right? The nervous system arousal, and being aware of when you are in a position to make good decisions and when you're just reacting, and being able to kind of work through that. I found, it's, I learned a lot about myself, and wouldn't necessarily want to do it this way, but that's kind of what the cards that we've been dealt. But just seeing that reflection of, myself and other people reflected through other people was really eye-opening over the last couple of years.
Yeah, great points. And totally agree too. And, it's that whole thing where, if we're feeling unsafe, right? If we're feeling triggered by something, if we're activated, if our amygdala is firing off, right? Like, it's kind of like what you said, our empathy and our concern and our ability to understand even what's going on with other people, it goes down, right? And so it's like, I always think, when you see somebody else that's really responding to something, or having like, a difficult day, or is like shooting off on social media. I've even been that guy sometimes too, right? Where it's like, just having a bit of a time with something. You can just kind of think, well, that person's in pain, or that person's like, uncomfortable, or like something's coming up. They don't have the bandwidth to be able to be like, hey, I see you, maybe, you know, you've got something going on, but right, like even our ability to kind of take that information in goes down because our system's just kind of firing off. So I think exactly right. And just it's like what an interesting, like that has been, you know, if anybody, you know, is, you know, involved in, you know, whether you think you've done some work on yourself or, you know, you have some wisdom because of, you know, whatever's happened to you in your life, like this has been the biggest test of like, oh yeah, you think you got some things figured out? Okay, sure. Right. Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that observation. Who else wants to share some reflective thoughts? Oh, Amanda, yeah.
My experience with the pandemic actually, it was actually quite a positive experience. It made me slow down completely. I wasn't able to work for about a year and a half, and I had myself set up financially that it wasn't that much of a burden. It wasn't. Like don't have children. And just had lots of savings, and then of course the government's extra help was great. So it gave me the time to actually take a look at the things that I was feeling and thinking about, and also like get into a microdosing protocol, and all sorts of like little sort of catalysts, little things happened that kind of led me to the next thing, that led me to the next thing, that led me to the next thing. And in all honesty, over the past like 2 years, I feel like a different person. Like it's like, and I would have never been able to do this without that time off and that opportunity to actually look at what was going on with me, like in me, instead of being completely focused on work and, you know, whatever other distractions that I had. So it's been a really positive thing for me. And I feel really, really blessed that it has, because I know for a lot of people it hasn't. So yeah, that's my perspective.
Thank you. Yeah. And I just find it fascinating too, where it's like, just like looking at anything where, yeah, it's not all good, it's not all bad, right? But just like the ability to say like, you know, just like anything that we go through in life sometimes, and maybe this is even related to that post-traumatic growth, like when we have some kind of lesson or we get something, or we, you know, we get some wisdom through our life experience kind of thing. Sometimes we don't go, oh, I'd love to go back and redo that, right? Like it was kind of difficult, but we gain something from it too, right? Even if it's kind of not voluntary. Yeah, thanks.
I've kind of felt the same way, actually. Like the pandemic's kind of been a game changer for me. Like I went from suicidal for 5 years, dealing with mental health issues, got fired from a job because of mental health issues, and had to go on medical leave just before the pandemic because of a surgery. And then when I came back, I had to stay on medical leave. And I was like, well, what do I do with my life? And it's just been this game changer. Like I went from thinking I was going to be an academic to now being a holistic practitioner and an animal sports therapist. And like before the pandemic, I would have scoffed at someone like me. And now here I am. And it's like, whoa, like what the heck happened? And obviously I'm not the only one, but it's been, like we were saying in the chat, it's almost been like an initiation ritual for some of us, where it's just exploded our lives into something we weren't even expecting.
Yeah, nice. It's kind of like, you know, like this very prolonged version of this like dark night of the soul, like, you know, kind of go inward and spend some deep, dark time with yourself, right? Like, it's interesting because one of my colleagues, you know, that like a long time ago, like the things that were the parallels with like psychedelic experience, I wrote this whole big thing, like there was a list of a whole bunch of stuff that was like, oh yeah, the thing we're in, how it kind of, you know, is in line with the things we know about getting through difficult psychedelic experiences. And, you know, my one friend's comment was like, you know, all the things that we've learned from our experience of like, you know, personal work and stuff like that, we're going to need all that stuff. We're going to need to like draw on that stuff to be able to help, you know, kind of get other people ready for that. Right. So, because, you know, not all of us have, you know, some of us have grown up with a lot of privilege and a lot of stability and a lot of access and resources, and just to kind of have that, you know, maybe threatened or affected in some way, I think it's, you know, just thrown a lot of people, right? So thanks for that comment. just looking at some of the comments, great comments in the chat too. There's a whole thing going on there. So yeah. Anyone else have any other thoughts, reflections, how things have been for them?
One of the early sort of existential crises pieces for me was realizing how easy it was to shut everything down and life continued on. And the quote that really stuck with me is, what value is there in being well adjusted to a profoundly sick society? And how easy was it to stop being consumerist? And how easy was it to stop going to all the places and doing all the things? And when everything stopped, people have spoken to this, when we're not going and doing all the things all the time and we have space to sit and think, a lot of people make profoundly different choices. So Cass, I had a very similar experience in that I was fired from a job, profoundly shifted the trajectory of my career, which I wouldn't have done otherwise. But it makes me wonder, how long did I stay in the career I did because I was just go, go, go all the time and didn't have a chance to stop and think about what I really wanted to do with my time. And now we've gotten a taste of that. And so now as things sort of, I don't know, depending on which perspective you take, wind down and we get back to normal life, I'm like, I don't want to go back to normal life. I don't want things to go back to the way they were. I'm different now. I'm changed because of this experience. And I can't pretend that the way things were before is okay. And there's like almost a helplessness in that. There's a sense that something should be done, but I don't know what it is to change things.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I think, yeah, I was trying to look up, there's something I wrote a little while ago, and just that idea of like, going back to like not wanting to go back to the same pace, like not wanting to go back to kind of like the hustle, like just kind of like, why is it's taken this external thing that happened for us to kind of realize maybe yeah, I'm going to read it. This is from May of 2020. On the other side, when we go back to whatever it is after this, can we please not have it be back to the pace of insanity, working a bazillion hours, not having enough time for friends and family, the notion that being out in nature is only something we do on occasional holidays and scattered weekends, thinking that art and movement and music are just hobbies instead of things we need for our souls to exist all the time. Connecting with others is something we only do if we have time instead of necessity. Working toward accumulating and savings and paying it all off so we can only really live and do what we want. Maybe when we're really fucking old and maybe finally get to the end and rest and put up our feet at the very end of our life. Can we see this as a wake-up call that much of our lifestyles are not fucking sustainable and it was making us sick in all of the ways? Can we please slow the fuck down and perhaps learn from other cultures who wonder what the actual fuck is wrong with us? A call for more connection, less things, more supports for individuals, more social fabric, more realistic expectations for families. Can we do this? Because fuck, I don't want to return to the frenetic. So this is a note to myself, but I know it reaches beyond. So for so many, no more swim upstream. Yeah, that seems fitting. Yeah. Yeah, just seeing Cass saying we still have far to go, but this is for sure a great beginning. Just hope we don't forget it too quick, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I appreciated some of the simple things that you said, Tarzi, like grounding back into the body and looking at capacity and kind of being there in order to cope with everything instead of just spinning around coping with everything without attending to where we need to be grounded in the body and what we're experiencing. So it's a good, helpful, simple reminder about, I think, for me, what I need that works as I'm coping with immense changes that have happened in the last couple of years.
Thanks, Jody. Yeah, absolutely. Just that, how do we use the info of the tuning in? Like what, like that's like almost like this continued integration period. Oh yeah, that's like what's going on is like this integration. Yeah, Brittany's saying integration for everything. Yeah, life and all of the things, right? Yeah.
Like where do we find stability when there's so much change? Well, it's can we find it in ourselves if we can regulate and connect with the body, and it's not in anything else outside if there's so much change going on.
Yeah. It's like has to start here, and then yeah. But yeah, they kind of both directions, all the directions affect each other. Thank you. Paul Bridger looks like he's having some deep thoughts.
Not that deep. I was just thinking about applesauce.
Oh, that's all good. Anybody else have any comments or?
I do just short is I just found everything in my life got so amplified. And I was just sitting here and I was actually thinking about, I have 3 children that are growing in their 20s. And it was really interesting for me to observe how they moved through everything, and how they're dealing with everything. And yeah, I was just having some curiosities tonight. I was just thinking back to all the 2 years, and how our relationship has really changed. And yeah, and I did, when this hit, I did treat it like a journey. I was like, okay, I have the medicine tools. I know exactly what to do. I don't know exactly what to do. I know nothing. I'm still sitting here kind of dazed, but yeah, there's yeah, I still don't really. I think though I came back to myself. I used to be always people pleasing and giving and giving and giving. This gave me a chance to really come back to myself, to me.
And Tanis, you're not off the hot seat yet. Brittany's asking you, what did you notice? She says, I'm curious how the younger generation is navigating it compared to us. Like, what did you notice in your kids?
Oh, the funniest one, I think my son is probably the one that sticks out the most. He just had this whole like party mode, like, I don't care, whatever. It was just a big party mode, and he's in university, and it was just there was a lot of fun things that happened for him. And I mean, he waited till the last minute to come home during COVID. The borders were closing. We didn't know it was going to happen. My other 2 daughters are very conservative, and one's in the healthcare profession, and she actually got into that during COVID. She's very, she has lots of like, I don't know, theories or the word, like just, she was very, she was like, I know I'm a healthcare professional, but I also know there's other stuff going on. My oldest daughter, she completely 100% went introvert, like just pulled away from everybody. And yeah, and she probably, out of the 3 kids, she probably has had the hardest time dealing with everything.
Yeah, so lots of differences, even kind of within the same family. But yeah, I definitely relate to that, Tanis, where it's like, you know, my kids are younger too, but it's like, yeah, I mean, it was so important for me to try to, not to try to put them in a bubble, but to try to insulate them from the, you know, as much of the, I don't know, disruption as much as possible, right? But knowing that how could it not, you know, not affect them too. So yeah.
At risk of getting a little political, like I'm younger, I'm 28, and what I noticed from older people in my life is that a lot of them became very aware that the government doesn't always tell the truth and doesn't always have their best interests at heart, kind of thing. And it was really interesting to hear like people who formerly were like, yeah, you know, like I'm voting for this party, this is my party forever, I'm never changing, to now being like all politicians are crooks and we shouldn't trust any of them, and they've all got interests of their own that are not in line with the population's interest. And like in particular, my mom, like she went from very, very staunch conservative to just before the pandemic becoming a little bit more liberal to now being almost apolitical, and I've noticed a little bit more of an increase in that. Like people are sort of detaching from it and realizing that, you know, the divide and conquer tactic is being used heavily against us. And you know, I think especially at the start of the pandemic where, you know, one week it was one thing and then the next week it was the next thing and then the next week it was the next thing. And everyone's like, okay, like, what do we trust? Like, and I think the government kind of shot themselves in the foot right off the bat by not saying, we don't know what to do, just wait. But because they wanted to act like they knew what to do right off the bat, I think that's where things started to kind of unravel for them, which has been interesting to watch because like conspiracies are kind of my hobby. So I'm into like the parapolitical kind of stuff behind the political parties, like the things that are pulling the strings behind the parties, and to see people who normally give me a very weird look if I ever bring it up to now saying stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, like I've been telling you guys this for years. Like that's what's going on. So I'm kind of hopeful that maybe we will see large scale political changes, but at the same time, I'm a little bit worried because there's people who are hoping to capitalize on that destabilization.
Oh yeah, and I think if you're just kind of like overall talking about what happens when we think we know what our reality is, or what, you know, we can kind of lean into, or kind of what our beliefs are, right? And like just how much people have, you know, not everybody, right, but just like how there's been this opportunity for people to really look at their values and their orientations, you know, in a way bigger way, right? You know, so yeah, I think that's really interesting without getting into the, you know, all the weeds of the politics, because I know we all have opinions of it too, right? But just like, you know, you think, and not that, you know, ever is life ever like your face value assumptions, right? Like what happens when you kind of like, you know, proverbially sort of pull back the, you know, and see the, you know, I guess the man behind the curtain type of thing, right? You know, what happens for somebody, you know, when they kind of, you know, there's things that come into question. So yeah, it sounds like a, you know, almost again, similarities with psychedelic work, right? I thought there was this, but maybe it's something else or something different. So yeah. Anyone else have any other things well, this Brittany's saying so many perspectives shifts in the last few years. Yeah. And I know something else I was going to mention too, like we definitely know that, and I think maybe Alfieri, when you were talking about this, I just forgot to mention, like, we know that most people kind of like that have decent or, you know, I guess, you know, enough sort of coping skills to kind of handle things. Like we know for sure that most kind of even, I don't want to say regular people, right? But like people that have adequate coping skills overall, theirs are reduced, right? So it's like, you know, absolutely. And so people that have, you know, maybe there was, you know, for anybody that was already struggling with kind of, you know, pre-existing, you know, other kinds of, you know, conditions or other kinds of difficulties or, you know, trauma stuff coming up as well, right? All of that, of course, gets exacerbated with this in a very interesting storm. So just wanted to mention that. Other thoughts or people that we haven't heard from? Anybody feel like, I just want to make sure that I keep making comments, but I want to give everybody else a chance to
yeah,
pop
can you
into.
hear me?
Yeah, is that Joe?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Yeah, so before the last 2 years, like I already had a lot of trauma from childhood and medical trauma throughout my life. I've had chronic health issues my whole life. And then COVID hit and everything just got worse, and my PTSD and anxiety, depression, everything just got completely out of control. Like it was really, really bad. But it gave me the opportunity to, I ended up having like a lot of time off work. I've been off work for a lot because of COVID and everything and my health issues. And it gave me the opportunity to explore psychedelics a lot deeper. And like I've been using psychedelics almost twice a month for 2 or 3 years. And I don't think I would have having that space if it weren't for this pandemic and having all this time off. I don't think I would have been able to mentally process all of those experiences on top of working and everything else. And like these experiences have helped me to like really transform my trauma and have helped like heal so much stuff that like I'm still unpacking and trying to integrate it, and like finally having a community of people to talk to about the experiences. But just, you know, it has given me that space to be able to look at my mental health and take things more seriously, and like slow down and really think about where I'm going in my life and what I want to do. And you know, I am taking a career direction change too, and like eventually I would like to do some kind of healing work for trauma and mental health, but I haven't figured that path out yet. But you know, it's definitely helped shift that career path. And yeah, like I don't know, like for me, like I already had a lot of trauma and PTSD, and so COVID hit. In a lot of ways, it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is normal. This is how I live. I live in fear. This is my life. This is life. But then things started getting worse for me too. So I don't know. It's been a couple of interesting years, and the next few years are going to get even more interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see where we're going to go.
Thank you. Yeah, that's you know, it sounds like kind of having this opportunity, and also, yeah, some kind of like the themes of what we're saying, like kind of taking advantage of the time, and you know, not that it was, you know, it's not all good, it's not all bad kind of thing, right? Like, yeah, and I just hope for you, Joe, that it's just, you know, all those the journeys that you've been on, you know, it sounds like it's, you know, just like any healing, it's not like, you know, kind of linear, it's kind of all over the place, right? So, but you know, it's just given you this opportunity. So thank you so much for sharing about, yeah, where you've been and where you're going. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyone else have any other comments, thoughts?
A lot of the people who are in the event tonight are already members of the Heart Hub community. That's one of the places where we promoted this. But for the people that aren't, this is a really good example of the kind of spaces that we've been trying to create in that community regularly. Every couple of weeks, there's an event like this. There's other different events that are allowing people in different ways to come together and talk in different contexts and to process stuff like this. And to be able to come together with other humans and to talk things through, it's not the same as being in person with people, these Zoom meetings, but for me, it's been better than nothing. It's been a way to verbalize, and the act of verbalizing this stuff, or the processing that happens to turn it into words that other humans can hear and be witnessed in, that has a value. It gets this energy shifted and moved around, and things make sense. And it's a very similar process to me as it is to journaling. Like the act of putting pen to paper puts things together, processes things, but this is different. To hear different perspectives, to hear validating perspectives that are similar to mine, to hear that other people are having the same difficulties that I am, it feels like it's only possible in community. It doesn't happen through social media or broadcast media. To have these kind of interactions is precious to me. And so for anybody that feels like this is something valuable, find a community. The Heart Hub is one. It's not the only one, though. There's lots of these places. Finding community of people that you connect with and feel safe with to have these kinds of conversations is really, really, really important.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I know for sure if I didn't have my, yeah, Brittany's saying find the humans, all that kind of thing, right? And there's some existing groups, or even just to have, and it doesn't have to be, you know, 58 people, but just being able to have some, or one or two or something like that, right? And that's why, you know, a lot of us are really big on any kind of work that you're doing is, you know, making sure that it's not just, you know, you're not just talking to, say, I don't know, your therapist or something like that, but the other people around that are your peers, you know, colleagues, people you can call on whenever, type of thing, that you don't have to pay to be able to talk to, right? The paid people are they're helpful too sometimes, right? But yeah, Brittany's saying it kind of takes a village, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just have a couple, I just want to make sure this is going to be kind of like the closing of the chat time. So we still have there's a little bit of time. So feel free to pop in if you still have something to say, whether that's coming off mute or just anything like that. Maybe I'll just share my last couple things here. Hang on a second. Whoa, not that. Not that. Oh my God. Hang on a sec. I gotta find it again, guys. Here we go. Peter, I'm having technical difficulties. There we go. Okay. From current slide. Okay, so we did that. So the last couple are just kind of like the next one is my comment about how things have been over the last while. That wasn't a microdose. Oh yeah, so you guys probably can agree that all the things we've been in, it was definitely a higher dose, not a microdose kind of thing. And yeah, just wanted to say thanks for tonight. And this picture is for those of it that know me, I have pets, and like how cute is that? These are my coworkers that I get to hang out with all the time. They match. And after this, if people have any questions or ever want to reach out, that's my contact info there. I'm also in contact with Peter and Brittany quite a bit. They're definitely some of my peeps. So yeah, just appreciate the time to kind of be able to give you guys this dump of information and that kind of thing. I'm going to stop sharing and just see if there's any other. That looks like a PetSmart commercial. Yeah, totally. Yeah. If they could get jobs, that would be great. Right. But yeah, does anybody have any other last kind of closing comments or thoughts or questions or anything like that? All right. Well, thanks for making the time for this tonight, you guys, and good to see a lot of familiar faces. And yeah, you're welcome for info tonight. And I'm sure we'll catch some of you guys another time again. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tarzi. Thank you for taking the time. We really, really appreciate it, and for all this wonderful information and for the discussion as well. Thank you for everybody who participated, and also for those who were observing and witness to this discussion. That feels really good as well. So as I mentioned, the Heart Hub is a place that is an option for people who maybe don't have a community of their own to come and have these kinds of discussions in these kinds of spaces. And so we'd very much encourage you to have a look at that and feel out if it's a good fit. We do these once a month, every month, the first Tuesday of the month, on a rotating schedule of who knows what the topic is going to be. Usually it's psychedelic related, but not always, in an effort to try and bring people together to give them tools and tips and techniques and information, and mostly just to gather as humans to talk for a bit and have a break from the world. So thanks everybody for coming. We look forward to seeing you at other events, and if not this one, next time. So those of you who watched the recording all the way through, thank you for doing that, and we will see you next time.